In this video, I'll build a newsletter generator using Cursor, Claude 4.0, and Firecrawl. The main idea is showing a behind the scenes of how you can create a web app like this one by just vibe coding it entirely. I explain everything during the video, but just so you know what to expect, this is the end result. You can add news sources like Anthropic/news or Firecrawl's blog, which is in this directory right here. After adding those, you just need to select a date range and then hit fetch news. The fetch news articles will be placed down here as these cards, which you can move them around to switch the positions, as well as clicking on them to view a detailed summarization of that specific article. From this point, you can filter out the ones that you don't like just by clicking the X button. But if this is the final structure, you can just hit the generate newsletter, at which you'll send a request over to Claude 4.0. So it creates the entire newsletter using this as a context. When the newsletter gets generated, you'll see this card down here, which allows you to actually edit that newsletter as well as check its preview on the right side. If you click on Save Newsletter, this newsletter will be sent down here where you can keep track of all the newsletter that you created. Clicking on View shows you the entire generated newsletter. Let me first create the next app. Yes. Now let me add Prisma client, initiate Prisma, and finally add ShadCN UI. So I've done this in a previous video. If you want the step-by-step, just click on the link above. My cursor is on my right screen. Let me drag this in and type in my newsletter generator. Is that it? Yeah, newsletter generator. Nice. Save it, and we should be good to go. Now let me draw out kind of the structure of the project that I aim to build. I'll start off with the end result and then just kind of reverse engineer the process so I understand how I can actually build that. And then once I understand that and once I understand the tools that I need, then I'll be able to create the actual prompt and ask Cursor to build everything. Yeah, so this is kind of messy. Let me make this full screen. It's actually a bit easy to understand. So we're going to extract all the posts from tech blogs. And for my specific case, there are tech blogs because my newsletter will be about AI automation, vibe coding, anything that's happening in the tech field specifically for AI. And that's where this first filtering comes in. I'm only going to retrieve news related to this. So the first website could be this tech blog website right here. Another website could be another tech blog right over here, which generates all this list of news for the website too. And I'm doing it like this because I believe that Firecrawl would work better if I focus on extracting specific posts from a specific page rather than asking it to go onto every single blog post, grabbing everything and just giving me the entire context. So if I focus on chunks of news for specific blog posts, then ideally that should be better. Because now from all this context, I can send it over to another LLM, which will create for me the list of suggested news. So each one of these blocks right here is a different news. And then my interface will allow me to do what I mentioned earlier, which is to be the human in the loop and choose which news I want to keep and which I want to discard. After this process is done, I'll likely hit a save button or some sort, which will save this over to the database. Because then if I want to start again, if I want to use those specific news from that day, I can just use it again without having to do all this process once more. Now from these filtered news, I can then generate my final newsletter. And here is where the text style comes in, to use your own way of speaking, your own way you want the newsletter to actually be. Because I feel that the majority of newsletters, they try to do everything in a single try, which is just getting every single markdown language from the websites they scrape, put it all together and then say, hey, I want it to use this specific style. So it's a lot for the LM to handle. And aside from that, you're also going to spend a lot if you're using a more capable model. Well, in this process, I can just use the more powerful LLM just for this text style. Okay, enough said. I probably didn't think about some edge cases that might show up, but that's okay. Let's just keep on building. If at some point we get an error, we can just learn from that mistake and start over. Now let's start prompting. I usually like to open up my notepad and just start typing while looking at my previous drawings. Yeah, and now that I'm typing this out, it's really nice to type out the actual prompt. Some people just take a screenshot of what they drew inside of a ScholarlyDraw and send it over to ChatGPT and say, hey, produce a entire prompt for me. But I believe this process is pretty interesting because you'll find some issues that you didn't think of before. And not even issues, but enhancements like Right now I'm writing about how it should use Firecrawl's extract feature to grab a summary of all the news from the websites. But now where am I informing it about these websites? Is it just statically placed inside of the code? So a better approach for this would be allowing the user to actually place in and save the websites that it wants to be extracting from. And since this process comes before the actual extraction process, because it needs to understand what it's going to extract from, I like to explain it in that order over in my prompt. Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, maybe it's not a good idea of filtering it for a second time right here, since the results we get here, they're pretty much going to be the same over here. And since we're already going to adjust the style down here, maybe we don't really need this part. Maybe this isn't a filtering. It's more of a way of structuring it into a list of news so that we could visually see that in a nice structure over at the website. Now that I think of it, it should be a pretty interesting idea to have the user reassemble which cards come first. So let's include that as. And we should also have a way to retrieve all the news that was saved in the database. So let's just make everything show up in a card below everything, like the history of all the news that was searched. And later on, we can implement a feature where you can actually choose from a specific date to another so that we only retrieve specific news that we need. Yeah, I'm really thinking this through because one of the points of saving these news posts is that later on when I produce a new newsletter, I don't want it to use a previous news. So I don't want it to have repetitive news like the news from the past week. I want it to understand what it sent out in the last newsletter and not send that out once again. Or even to make reference like, hey, in the past newsletter, I talked about this. Well, that evolved into this, right? So the past news will be inserted inside of the context for the text style in creating the final newsletter. And really just saying that out loud gave me that idea. So let me write that down in the prompt as well. Okay, I wrote a fairly huge amount of prompts. Let's open up our Next.js app as well as Cursor and let me place all that in there and let's see what we get. Well, everything seems to be done. Let's first include all the environment variables we need. And for that, paste it in here. Let's open that up. First, let me go over to Firecrawl, grab this key right here, copy that, paste it in here. I hope I don't forget to change this. Now let me go over to Open Router, create a new key. This new key will be the newsletter generator. Nice, create. Grab that, paste it in here. Nice. Okay, so this is the first version of the newsletter generator. Let's see how it works. Usually it doesn't work on the first try. We'll likely get a misuse of some kind of API fetch. But let's see. So I've already placed in Firecrawl's blog, an optional name. Let's say Firecrawl. Okay, I clicked on add. Okay, Firecrawl was added. Let's also add the Anthropic news page. So news, optional name, Anthropic, add. Okay, now to fetch the latest news, there's the date range here, but I can't really change that. And if I click on fetch news, I don't get anything. So let's go back to the console log. And apparently clicking on that doesn't get us anything. It uses the API/fetch news, but really doesn't do more than that. So let's just specify everything that's happening over to the LM, give it the right context so it understands what it needs to do to fix this, or at least to log the errors more appropriately back to us. Nice, let's go on to the second prompt. Okay, the date was corrected, but there's still something going on with the transparency for whatever reason. But to take advantage of each prompt we send out, let's test everything that we can and only then come up with our third prompt. So apparently it is searching, it is using Firecrawl, but it's retrieving 0 articles for whatever reason, because from this date range, it should be finding something. Now there's really 2 possibilities here. One, that it's using only the main domain of these websites instead of the /news or /blog. And the other possibility is that it's not understanding correctly how to use the extract feature from Firecrawl. So one thing I can do is open this up, go over to the PowerShell and type in yarn Prisma DB Studio. This will open up everything that's in my database, and checking this right now, I can see that at least in the database, the URL was saved correctly. So ideally, vibe coding doesn't have a lot to do with coding. So I'll close that for now, despite really wanting to open that to see what's going on. I still want to show you that it's possible to create this even without coding at all. So let me click on fetch news, get exactly the result that I got down here, copy that, paste it inside of the chat, and let's go on to our next prompt. Also, I've noticed that the toaster isn't really working, so let me copy that as well, paste it in there. Now let me open up Firecrawl's documentation for extract. So Firecrawl extracts documentation, extract, okay. And before I send it over, let me just take a look to see if this is the actual documentation. I believe it is. So yeah, I can copy the page up here, head down here, and let's just paste all of that inside of our chat with Claude 4.0. That's done. Apparently it didn't fix the background for the cards, which is pretty annoying. But from June 10th, actually let's choose like June 1st all the way to June 17th, fetch news. Since fetching the news failed again, I'm now testing it over in Firecrawl because probably it's an issue with how it's fetching it from my app instead of an actual issue with Firecrawl. And to test this in their playground, all you need to do is get this schema, paste it in here. If that doesn't work, if you get an incorrect schema, you can always go over to Claude and just say, please fix my schema. And then it will kind of stringify the JSON so that it works in the Firecrawl playground. And then place in the URLs as well as the prompts. It's this exact prompt right here. And then now you'll actually see the result you'll get. And just by the time it's taking here, I already know that there's something going on with the app, since just by clicking on fetch news, I immediately get a 0 articles found results. Nice, so this is the result we got from Firecrawl. It's an array of articles where each object inside of the array has a URL, the title, the summary, and the published date. So without even looking at the code and just looking at the console log, you'll notice that it's crawling some URLs that are completely wrong. So news/blog. So probably it's just adding these /blogs because it saw that inside of the Firecrawl documentation. So let's copy this, copy that, paste it in here, and we will describe that we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to add anything. It should just fetch exactly the URL that you used, except for just adding this, because that's a way of telling Firecrawl that you want it to crawl inside of that specific website. Aside from that, just looking at this, the schema doesn't have the date range, the prompt doesn't have the date range. So how is Firecrawl's extract feature going to know that we want that range of dates? So we need to specify that over in our prompt as well. Additionally, another thing I've noticed is that since I asked it to batch fetch all these requests from Firecrawl, maybe that's bugging it. And you really don't need batch searching since Firecrawl already offers you a way of searching every single URL that you specify over to it. So let me just remove that part where I mentioned batching. Now, the final major issue here, which is what I suspect, is that it's using the success true as what Firecrawl actually returned, when in reality, the first fetch, like the first post you make to the extract endpoint of Firecrawl, you'll only get this success true down here because it's actually started the process of scraping, crawling, and gathering all the data and then bring it back afterwards. So what we have to do is actually use the get extract status, and then our project will keep asking Firecrawl, is it done? Is it done? And as soon as it's actually done, then it will retrieve the actual scraped data. So let me get all this context and explain it over to Cursor. Okay, so now it should be fixed. Let me just restart the app. Okay, it seems like it's working. News extraction in progress. But yeah, this is a pretty nice interface. Like we have this toaster up here that's saying extracting articles. I just feel like it's a bit redundant. We'll probably need to specify afterwards that we don't really need this because everything is already down here. But yeah, pretty cool. Okay, we definitely got some results. This is not in the time range. Maybe it should order everything from the most recent topic to the oldest one, because then if it ever brings back the wrong results, we can just exclude them all the way down here. But let's actually look at the text. Several updates have been made to the Anthropic API. Honestly, this is really short. I don't want it to be so summarized like this. And sometimes it doesn't even like retrieve everything that we need. So let's exclude this. Let me also exclude some results like from April. Full screen, the design is really clean. And for some reason, I can select them. I don't know if like selecting them is choosing them for like sending it off to the database. That's not exactly what I wanted, because like here, ideally, I'm just going to filter out the ones that I don't like. The date range was totally not used because down here there's like results from 2024, like right here, Firecrawl July 2024 updates. And let's remove that. And let's actually like remove a bunch of these results. Let me unselect these, click on save selection, and yeah, selection saved successfully. Okay, it saved successfully, but where is it? That needs to be changed as well. Let me hit generate newsletter and see what it gets us. Okay, newsletter generated successfully. Let's take a look at this. Anthropic TIGIC moves, pioneering AI in science education and national security. Okay, this seems pretty good. If I hit save newsletter, the newsletter was saved. Previous newsletters listed down here. Let me F5 to see if it still has a persistent newsletter. Wow, so when you F5, you actually get all the articles that was fetched. Let me F5 again. Okay, all those articles, if I exclude them, they're really not being excluded from the database. They're just being excluded from the current state. And I have access to the previous newsletter that I generated. Let me click on view to see how they're going to show me that. Okay, that view button doesn't work. And I also can't really drag these cards over. So let's again take note of everything and send it over to Cursor. Okay, now that that's done, sometimes you just need to start the Yarn Dev server once again, and then everything should work fine. Nice. So now we have a view full option, which toggles a dialog for you to see the entire text. This view right here should open up another dialog that is working fine. Before we click on fetch news, let me actually go over to our database and delete all the news that we currently have since we don't have a button to do that. Let's go back here, hit F5, and yeah, all those news are wiped out. Now our calendar should work fine. The background is right, but the days of the week aren't. And also when we click on that specific day, like June 1st, it's not really activating that specific date. And that's probably because it tried to change what ShadCN did. So I just need to specify for it to go back to whatever ShadCN has, because this works pretty fine. See, this is exactly what we want. Just open it up, click on that date. The date is marked. And so June 1st to June 17th, fetch news. I inserted a wider range from May 1st all the way over to today, which is June 17th, because this way we would get a lot more results. And these are the results. Pretty awesome. Like some of them aren't really that big. I believe this one down here is pretty much complete. And now dragging these cards actually works. So if I click right here, introduction to Claude 4, let's see. I think the other card needs to be heard. Yeah, that's how it works. Not really that easy to use, but a few prompts will probably fix that. Let me remove the ones that are just a short sized result, like this one. Let me see. This one is actually a complete text. This one is short. Yeah, I mean, let's leave all these 7 articles and try to generate a new newsletter. Generating newsletter. And this is using Claude 4.0 to generate the newsletter. So I expect it to create something pretty cool for us. Okay, just generated. Nice. Now we have an actual editor and a preview of how that actually looks. Not sure if they're including line skips. Yeah. And when I click on the export button, nothing really happens. So I might be changing this over to a copy button where I can just copy this and paste it inside of my actual newsletter. Let's save that newsletter. Now I can view it down here still without the line break. So let's add that inside of our prompt. Since I find this a bit hard to explain, I'm just going to send over an image. As you can see right here, it's just an image of how the editor shows it, because like we skip lines twice here, but over in the preview, it's not, like it's only skipping a single line. And just now, as I'm reading through these news articles, it seems like it duplicated some of the posts. And this doesn't even seem to be an issue from Firecrawl. So this is something we should definitely fix. Let me exclude this one for now. We also got another duplicated one here. Claude Gov models for US national security customers. Let me exclude that one. Okay, now we have 5 articles, and I mean, this should be good to go. Let me prompt this one, and okay, as it's finishing explaining which were the changes, and now we can actually see the amount of characters. Still, we need to implement a way to actually delete these cards, not only temporarily remove them as a state. Now let me hit generate newsletter and see what we get. Okay, nice. So now it seems like it's actually breaking line. Let me save the newsletter and check it down here. Yeah, this is better. The AI Frontlines, Anthropic's Strategic Evolution in Security, Innovation, and Government Relations. Your weekly briefing on the cutting edge developments shaping the future of AI. Okay, so now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, here is where we can actually adapt it to our style. And since ideally everyone should have their own unique style of sending out this email, basically what you'll want to do is head over to this part of the code right here. And if you don't want to do that, you can just describe for Cursor to go over to that part of the code and change that. But it's pretty descriptive. Just go over to generate newsletter, route, then just scroll a bit down here, and this is the actual prompt that's being used to create our final newsletter. So that is definitely a next step in the project. Another thing that would be really cool to add to the project would be the novel text editor. It's basically a text editor that allows you to edit stuff inside of your own application, just like you would in Notion. So you can just add a slash and then select heading, and in here you'll place here is the title. This way we could actually write out the entire newsletter. You wouldn't need a preview, for example, but this is already pretty cool. Other improvements, like I said, would be better CRUD operations, so a way to actually delete this from database. And this is just one prompt away. I'm just not doing it for now because, I mean, half of the time that I've been building this project, which in Waka time tracks 3 hours building just this newsletter generator, most of these nearly 4 hours is either waiting for Cursor to create something that I asked it for, or recording takes, or recording some takes for the video. But if this style of video where I'm kind of live coding it actually helps you, then please leave a like and I'll record more. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then.